Jeff Benson coming to you today from Jacksonville, Florida. This is one of my favorite subjects. We're going to talk about home builders and the home building industry. I'm the program manager for Builders Risk, so a lot of what we talk about today, we're kind of like looking at the industry and the class of business through the line of business of Builders Risk. But we'll kind of touch on a lot of different factors. We should run through this in 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. But I do greatly appreciate you taking some time out of your busy day to talk about this great subject, Home Building 101. What is a home builder? It's an interesting class of business, an interesting contractor. So you hear the term a lot of times, 100% subbed out paper general subcontractor, subcontract, 100% subbed out paper contractor. What that means is they don't have any employees. They only deal with subcontractors. And there's some major ramifications because of that, and we're going to touch on that. Keep in mind today, we're going to talk about builder's risk. There are other lines of business, general liability, automobile, work comp. They're very different for this class of business, but builder's risk is one of the key lines that a home builder needs. So we're going to talk about what is a home builder, other than being a 100% subbed out general contractor. There's different types of builders. You hear these terms thrown around a lot. There's custom builders. There's speculative builders, there's tract builders, production builders. For the sake of what we're going to talk about today, it's more geared towards what I call the custom or the spec builder. These builders are a little smaller. Sometimes they build 5 homes, 10 homes a year. Maybe they build higher valued homes. And they're just like what you would think. A custom builder builds custom homes. So if you're interested in a home, you sit down with the builder and they design a home to meet your individual needs. Each home can be dramatically different. I've seen custom builders that build very large homes, and then they'll turn around and build a small type home too. So it's really, they're a very flexible contractor. And that presents some issues from an insurance standpoint because it's not the same every time. You hear the term speculative builder, which actually, by the way, is coming back a little bit now. So you will have some builders that build houses with no buyer yet. Now, sometimes they build the house and they finish it maybe 80%, and then they sell it. So the last 20%, the trim, the home buyer can determine what color they want, maybe pick their appliances out and stuff like that, but the shell of the home is already built. So when you have a speculative home being built, that also has major ramifications from a builder's risk insurance standpoint. Custom builders, spec builders. The last one is the production builder or the tract builder. That's the very, very large builders. We're not going to talk much about them today because it's a whole other class of business, really, when you get involved in someone building hundreds and thousands of homes. They do have builder's risk concerns, but for today, we're going to talk about the smaller builder. I think it makes more sense. Interesting enough, too, I was just reading some of the stats from today. Housing starts came out. And unfortunately, they were down a little bit in December. But the good news there is, as you read through the article, housing permits were actually up. So what that means is housing is always lagging a little bit on the statistical data that they report. So things were down in December, but now in January and February, they're predicting that they're going to be up in the spring. So that's good news for us as we talk about housing starts. The other thing that I had mentioned too is when I mentioned the large tract builder or the production builder, because of the recession a number of years ago, they actually gained a market share. You had more and more tract builders building more houses. They could still obtain financing. Maybe they already owned a lot of land. So the custom speculative builder kind of diminished as far as the market share that they have. The good news is over the last 3 or 4 years, they've been coming back and they're starting to gain market share again. It's really a function of the economy, and as things are going well, you'll see more custom builders coming back online. And so that's good news for what we're talking about too. Let's talk about the home builder and what makes them a good risk. One would be they work with the same subcontractors. If you have a home builder and they've been in business any length of time in a given area, they have a tendency to work with the same subs over and over again. The same heating and AC contractor, the plumbers, the electricians, the interior trim guys, the roofers. They all kind of stick together. So even though they're subcontractors, and they're not employees of the general, they're very close because they work together on projects time and time again. Thing about a custom home is it can vary dramatically. So can it vary in value? It can vary in length of time it takes to build a house. Sometimes with a custom home, they're 3/4 of the way done, and the homeowner decides they want to change things. So they got to kind of pivot and do different things. It can extend the project dramatically. The number of homes, I've seen builders build 1 or 2 houses one year. They'll build 20 houses the next year, back to 1 or 2 after that. So it's very, very cyclical. But what makes them an interesting class of business is they're very resilient. Reporting form policies might be one answer too, is if they don't want to do individual policies on individual houses, there's different ways you can report how many homes they're building. Just a good way of staying flexible for the builder. Adaptability, ease of doing business. What we've seen with this class of business is that as the younger generation takes over, you'll see more and more of the CAD programs. They do everything online. They have a lot of very sophisticated automation. Obviously, they like things optimized for their mobile devices. So they'll do things on their tablets or their laptops on the job site. They're very quick to embrace technology. So they like direct bill. They like paying things online. They like being able to access their policy, probably being able to add coverages, subtract coverages. All those things are very important to them. And I think you're going to see even more of that as time goes on. I mentioned earlier how resilient they are, and this really took place, a lot of this took place in the recession a number of years ago. Most of the time you'll see a home builder comes out of the trades. And you know, it used to be maybe the framing contractor was the first one to become a general, but I've seen all the trades represented in the generals. And what happens is time gets slow. Maybe they're not building new houses. So if they're not remodeling and renovating homes, they go back to the trade they came from. That happened a lot 10 years ago in the recession. I had a lot of friends even that were general contractor builders. Next thing I know, they're back to repairing roofs, back to heating and AC or whatever they're up to. They're very resilient. Another thing that I've seen about resiliency is when there's a CAT event, when there's a catastrophic flood, a catastrophic hurricane, you'll see these builders kind of jump into motion very quickly and go in and start renovating, or remodeling these, fixing up these damaged structures. A couple years ago in Houston, a little storm called Harvey dumped a little water on Harris County. What we saw after that was a lot of general contractor custom builders. A lot of them even went in and purchased property, then fixed it up and sold it. So it was almost a combination of custom and spec, and they did very well. We insured a lot of those homes, so that is something that we're here to help you with. Very unique exposures when it comes to that kind of stuff too. I want to touch a little bit on loss control because this is critical. So when you have a home builder, a good home builder, they do have control of the job site, even though they don't have employees, everybody's subbed out. They, if they're a small home builder, then they act as their own project manager, which means they're on site every day. They're managing the subs to make sure they get there on time. They're doing the right thing. We just had a big claim a week ago on a commercial project. Interesting story. So the roofer decided they needed to heat up some of the glue. So they used a metal halide bulb to heat the glue up. Unfortunately, the roofer left the bulb on overnight, started a fire, and did $1 million of damage. So that could have been prevented if we had a project manager or a general contractor that simply went around the job site at the end of the day to check for hot spots. They would have seen that bulb on and turned it off. So that seems like a simple little loss control measure, but the best builders, like I said, do have control over the job site. They know what's going on. Theft is another big problem. So a lot of times it's just going by and making sure things are secure. Simple little loss control measures can help the loss experience dramatically. Coverages, things that for a small home builder especially. Let's say you have a home builder that's building 5 homes a year. So do you think if one of those homes is 100% completed and it burns down before the closing, so the builder still has it, they still own the home, Do you think the profit on that structure is important to that builder? If they're only building 5 of them and they have one burned down and they didn't make money, that's 20% of their profit for the year. So in a builder's risk policy, you can insure the profit for a very reasonable amount of money. I think that's something that most small home builders would like to insure. So profit is a very important coverage that you should have. Contract change endorsement. Do you think there's ever, as I mentioned earlier, especially with these custom builders, do you think they ever change the project that's going along? So maybe the homeowner decides they want to upgrade the tile, they want to upgrade the windows. So all of a sudden, the $1 million home is now $1.5 million home. So perhaps a coverage like contract change, which allows that to happen automatically, is an important coverage for these builders. Theft, I touched on theft. I think that's critical. So make sure there's no large theft deductibles that would apply. We talk about margins in the home building industry for a custom home builder, not on the sale of the land. Someone will buy a lot and subdivide it, but on the construction operations, they usually make between 10, 15, maybe tops 20% profit. So the margins are relatively small on that piece of it. So if they start having things stolen, obviously that's a big problem. Last piece on this is interest of subcontractors. A lot of times you don't know, does the general contractor own the materials? Does the subcontractor own the materials? Does the owner that's building the house own the materials? It becomes kind of a gray area. So you want to make sure that the coverage form you're selling covers all of their interests on one policy. So that's just more of this as conversations you should have with your underwriter. Make sure you understand the forms that you're selling. It always comes back to that. There's a community of home builders out there. I've been doing this a long time, and they kind of all stick together in a given area. One of the great places to find out about home building and actually meet home builders is the Home Builder Association. There's many of these around the country. They have local chapters. Usually it's done at a metro area like the Greater Atlanta Home Builder Association, things of that nature. It's just a great place to meet home builders. Actually, it's kind of funny. I've, especially when young producers start out in the business, they always ask me, what should they do? I said, well, go join the association and get involved. Actually meet a home builder. It's funny when so many agents sometimes don't know a lot about the class they're selling to. So these home builders are a unique group of people. Like I said, they're very entrepreneurial. They're very resilient. And they've been around a long time. And it's like I said, it's still the way homes are built in the United States today. And their market share is growing again. Another thing about home builders is they're very astute about their local market conditions. So a lot of times I'll see a home builder and he's building $1 million homes, and maybe they're not moving too much, so he'll drop down and build $500,000 homes. Or maybe times are good and he moves up and starts building $1.5 million homes. So they're a very, once again, back to the resilient nature of home builders. They adjust as time goes on based on market conditions. So that was kind of briefly what I think about home builders. And I guess the thing that is really important on builder's risk is to have a program, not just a policy, that understands home builders. Things like, how easy is it to extend a policy if it goes longer than you thought? Is the carrier going to allow you to do it on a monthly basis, or do you have to do it at a yearly basis? And is it fully earned or not? I would say that's important. So the more flexibility you have, because they're not building the same house over and over again. Each project's a little different. They might have 4 or 5 going on that are completely different. So they have different needs from the insurance standpoint. So hopefully that gives you a little taste of what's out there as far as the different types of builders that we're dealing with. And, like I said, every area is a little different, parts of the country. We're starting to see things like in South Florida, they're building more and more homes that are actually masonry non-combustible. So that presents a whole nother type of contractor. They're not building frame homes down there anymore. So, obviously increases the value, makes the term longer. Just things like that, I think, are important that you understand that. So I think what I'd like to do now is open this up to questions to see if anybody has any questions on home builders. or the home building industry. So ask away, I'm here.
All right, so we have a couple of questions coming in right now. The first question is your program designed for the custom builder? What is the maximum number of homes you look for from a builder?
Good question. Yeah, I would say that our program, it is designed for a custom builder because that implies they're not the national builder building, thousands of homes. It's more designed for the local builder. We can go up though. We wrote a builder not too long ago in the Mid-Atlantic states that built 150 homes a year. So I would say from the custom builder building 1 to the larger building 150, our program satisfies the needs of that class. So hopefully that helps.
Okay. Next question is, what guidelines do you suggest for establishing a reporting form, builder's risk policy versus one-shots?
Excellent question. I like that. Yep. So the general rule of thumb would be if they're going to build 5 or less homes a year, the one-shot or the single policy per structure is probably the way to go. Once they get above that, then it can go either way. When they get to be about 10 homes, 10 or more, reporting form is a very good option. We do have some builders that build 15 or 20 homes, but they like having individual policies. So we can go that way too. So I would say a general rule of thumb is reporting one-shots 5 or less, reporting forms more than that.
Okay, next question. What options are there for individuals wanting to act as their own GC? They contact us to secure builder's risk coverage, but that is hard to find for an individual.
Yeah, our basic rule of thumb is they have to have 2 years experience building houses. Now, we say experience, so maybe they've worked as a foreman on another project and they're going to act as their own GC. Yeah, we would contemplate that. We would probably offer them insurance. We just want to stay away from someone that's never done it and they watched, Tool Time on TV and decide they want to build their own house. We're not trying to do that. That would be like me building my own house. It would not be a good thing. So kind of like you got to prove experience in the building industry. That's what we're looking for.
All right. How would you add the profit coverage? Would you add it to the contract change order?
Well, here's the easiest rule of thumb of all, and we've had some past webinars, and we'll go over it one more time, is what is the proper amount to insure for builder's risk? And I would always say it's selling price minus land. So whatever that house is going to sell for, $1 million minus the cost of the land, $200,000 for the lot. If you sold it for $800,000, within that selling price is the profit. So that's always the best way to go. The contract change is just kind of like if something happens during the course of construction that makes it higher, makes the completed value higher, you could automatically have that coverage. The other option is once you become aware of it, just let the underwriter know. So let's say halfway through they call you and say a $500,000 home is now $750,000. All you would have to do is tell your underwriter and they could go back and adjust it as soon as you become aware of it. So I guess the thing is selling price minus land takes care of profit. That's what I would do it for.
All right, next question is, can the homeowner also own their own policy? Does it change the coverage?
It's the exact same coverage form. The owner can get coverage. They can add the builder as an additional insured, which I would advise. The form responds the same. Our form we think is best in class. We have a lot of automatic coverages built in, but so it can be in either one. Now I would say this: if my client is the builder, I would want my builder to have his own policy and add the owner as an additional insured, simply because then all of his interests are protected, and that's what you want. But it doesn't matter. Either the owner or the builder could be the named insured.
All right, next question. Any coverage for land, i.e. homes built on hillsides?
Like I said, that's the one thing we don't insure is land. what is completed value? It's labor, overhead, materials, and profit, if you want to include it. So there is no coverage for the land. I guess if the wind comes along and blows the house down, the lot's still there. A buddy of mine said, well, what if it's a tsunami and there's no land left? Well, I can't help you there, but there is no land coverage on the form. That's kind of basic in property insurance.
All right, next step. What are some best practices to ensure that all first-party entities are accounted for on builder's risk policies? Additional interest, adding all entities as named insured?
Well, so I think first of all, we would say, you want the owner definitely or the developer added on the policy. You want the building entity on the policy. The subcontractor's interest should automatically be included, at least as our form. You don't have to name them all, which that means is some building materials were delivered to the job site, someone stole them, whether the subs owned them or the general owned them, it didn't matter, it's still covered, so we'll make sure they get paid correctly. So I think a lot of it's based in the wording in the form, and so hopefully it's automatically included, their interests are automatically included. Keep in mind this is property insurance, not liability insurance. There's a whole other ball of wax, but the property, if they have a financial interest in the property, they would be covered under our form.
All right, next step, is there a maximum value that you're willing to write?
Well, it does depend on where it's located. If you think about builder's risk being, traditional property insurance, what are the things we're worried about? How far are you from the coastline? Whether you're in the southeast United States, are you in brush fire territories on the West Coast? Are you on an earthquake fault line? Are you subject to convective wind currents, and do you have tornadoes? These are the major cat events that we're worried about. So in all of those areas, we probably have different guidelines as far as the values that we can insure. So it does depend on where you're at in the United States. I sound like a politician, but it really does depend on where you're at. Our sweet spot for our program is 5 million and less frame and 25 million and less for masonry non-combustible fire resistant. Actually, joisted masonry and non-combustible all is up to 25 million. But that's just our sweet spot. If you have something else, by all means, give us a call. We might be able to help you out, depending on where the risk is located.
All right, if a home builder decides to rent out a property, can we keep on form or do we need to move over to a new policy?
So under our form, you got to look at when coverage ceases. And once the building becomes occupied, you have 90 days of coverage. So after 90 days, there's no coverage. So if it was rented out, and another one says once it becomes rental property and you accept rent, then coverage ceases. So the answer to the question is no, you would not have coverage under our form. You'd have to get another form if it was rental property once it becomes rental. If they just moved in and were living there and it was pending closing, you'd have up to 90 days coverage before coverage ceases.
All right, next question. Is theft automatically included?
Under our form, it is automatically included. And don't assume on all forms it is. It seems like a basic coverage, but I've seen some forms even recently that are more name peril and don't include theft, or they have a high deductible for theft. Ours doesn't. So, good question.
All right. Can we get a GL policy from you for our GCs?
No, unfortunately, we are only an inland marine program. We do builder's risk only. And just a little tip on the GL, be careful, because I have some companies out there talking about the fact that they offer GL and really they're only offering premises liability. It's not really, products completed operations for a general contractor. So just be careful on the GL products you're selling. They're not all the same. There's some very hollow forms out there.
Okay, can you address the residential tract home exclusions that a lot of carriers are adding to their policies? Any claim scenarios that you've seen?
Yeah, that's a GL question. And that's a whole nother can of worms. I don't want to get into that one, but you do have to look into that. From a builder's risk standpoint, we don't have a tract exclusion. I don't think that really applies to builder's risk. If we're insuring a builder We've agreed no matter how many homes he sells, how many he builds, he has coverage. Kind of does bring up a point. I didn't really cover the blanket policy or deposit premium. For a little larger builder, that's a great product, which means they pay a deposit on their estimate of what they're going to do for the year. And then at the end of the year, we audit it, and either you pay an additional amount or get return premium. But there are no exclusions for track for builder's risk. Good question.
Can you write attached housing?
Yeah, we define residential construction as detached 1 to 4 family. So obviously we can do up to 4 family on the residential side. Now, if it goes larger than that, it just becomes commercial, and we have a few other guidelines, but it doesn't really change the form. It's still the same form. So we can do multifamily depending on the value and other things that we look at. So really the only difference in our program, if it's residential 1 to 4 family, there's no charge for TRIA. If it's a commercial project, we make a nominal charge for TRIA. That's the only difference. So we like them all.
Okay, are there any exclusions for work below the foundation?
No. In fact, that brings up a good point. People ask me all the time, when does the project actually start? The way we look at it is it actually starts when you clear the lot, because you have labor, you got somebody sitting on a backhoe clearing a lot, so technically that's part of the selling price. But definitely once they start the rough plumbing and they're tying into the main line, all of that rough plumbing, which is part of the job site, is covered under our form. So that's when the project starts. Selling price minus land, always remember that.
All right, we probably have only time for this one last question. For values over $5 million, are you willing to split the properties on multiple policies, or do you have an MPL based on the closeness of the structures?
Okay, so if we would entertain it, which is a big if, we have to depend on where it is and all of those things. We have done some quota share. I don't know if that's the question. We've worked on a few bigger projects where we take a piece of it. The $5 billion is pretty hard and fast, though. We don't really like going much over that on a frame building. Like I said, on any other construction, we can go much higher, up to $25 million. But I would say if you have anything that's unique, it's worth a phone call. We'd love to talk to you. And hopefully we can help you out.
All right, that's pretty much all we have time for today. If your question didn't get answered, someone from our team will contact you and give you an answer to your question. Yeah,
and I just put my contact information and Donna Berry's contact information. We'll leave that up for a little while. If you want to call us or email us, feel free. We're here. We love talking about builders risk and home builders. I greatly appreciate your time today. Is that it?